Welcome to Psychedelics Today with your hosts Kyle and Joe. We're here with Brian Norman, the co-founder of Psymposia. He graduated from the University of Massachusetts Amherst with a BS in plant soil, insect science, and sustainable horticulture. He now lives in Baltimore and runs this awesome group, Psymposia, the event production company. Welcome to the show, Brian. Thanks for coming on.
Hey, Kyle and Joe. How are you guys?
Good.
Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for joining us.
So, Brian, let's kind of dig in about kind of like your history with Psymposia. How'd you get started with all this?
By accident. It was by accident. It was an interest. I was interested in the whole field for quite some time. I was interested in it by music, by reading Huxley, that developed over a little while, and reading in the history of everything. And it all came together in 2000. And I met my partner, Brett, in 2012 at a Horizons conference. Then we met again the following year, and we met Dennis McKenna there, and Dennis was awesome. And we did our first conference at UMass Amherst, and since then we've just been chugging away.
Awesome. Yeah, I remember meeting you, Nathaniel, and Brett at the Horizons conference that year. We all kind of hung out, which was really fun. But what kind of got you guys interested or motivated to put on an event really quick? Because I remember we all met in October, and then by April, you guys had a event planned for Amherst. It happened so quickly.
Yeah, we had an event, we had a company, we had a website, we had everything. It was really accidental. There wasn't any. It just came about. Dennis said yes, and we thought that was awesome. And it was initially going to just be a talk that he was going to do, and it just quickly turned into a 10 speaker 2-day conference, and we ended up getting Lex. Brett and Lex had met at Psychedemia, I believe, which was just before the Horizons conference in 2012. So, Lex agreed to host it, and it just came about. It was very spontaneous.
It's awesome, and it was such a fun event. Did you?
Yeah, we didn't know what we were doing. We had no idea what we were doing. We had to schedule things out, and we had no idea. There's all this stuff that we learned as we went along, and it was really fun. We were crazy. We didn't even have a budget. We had nothing. What's a budget? We didn't even think of a lot of stuff, and it all worked out.
Yeah. That's great. I'm kind of thinking on the track of, there's a lot of people that might want to get into the field of psychedelics, especially as they're starting to become a little bit more mainstream and articles are popping up all over the place. And, you and Brett have started this company, and you guys haven't taken like the counseling route or like the PhD route trying to do science with psychedelics. So I don't know, do you have any kind of tips really quick for anybody that is interested in maybe getting their foot in the field?
Yeah, we get asked this by people pretty often. How can I be involved in something? And I don't really have an answer for that. I don't think this field is much wider than just psychotherapy or just the clinical avenue. You can do a million things. I think that's the most interesting thing about either the psychedelic field or being involved in psychoactive plants in some way. It's very, very interdisciplinary, and I think that's why this field is so fascinating, because it's made up of people all over the spectrum. There are there are therapists, there are artists, there are musicians, there are research organization, there's drug policy people, there's the cannabis people, there is the harm reduction people, and I think that whatever your interest is, if you believe in the work, then I don't know, just I think you can make it work for yourself if you just pursue what your passion is, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great advice.
And for us, it's we try to work with all of the groups, and you know, and that's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun because then, you know, when it's not focused on one specific thing, we may be doing a psychedelic story, which that's one of the things that we do. And then, you know, we might be dealing with something in drug policy, you know, the next day, which is fun. It keeps it interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, for me, and my personal angle on it is, I love plant science. I love psychoactive plants. That whole field, ethnobotany, that whole field is really fascinating to me. And so I kind of approach it through the ethnobotany lens.
Mm.
You know.
So did you do a lot of studying of ethnobotany in your undergrad?
I didn't do a huge amount. I did it enough. A lot of it was just reading on my own.
Mm-hmm.
I think, unfortunately, that ethnobotany is a field that needs a lot more emphasis in academia. I think there's one. I could be wrong, but I think there's one undergrad ethnobotany program here in Maryland at Frostburg.
Mm.
I think that the University of Hawaii, I think they maybe shut down their undergrad ethnobotany program.
Mm.
So, yeah, that's you know, all these fields need to be addressed in academia. You know, the whole psychoactive plant classes basically don't exist. Psychedelic studies programs don't exist.
Mm-hmm.
Ethnobotany is almost non-existent.
Yeah.
You know, so it is for young people in school looking to get into this field. It can be difficult.
Right. You just said something about psychedelic studies. It's sad that I was trying to help with like creating some sort of psychedelic studies at the college where I did my undergrad at, and the avenue that we were taking was with breath work and, you know, the transpersonal lens, but unfortunately things didn't go too well with the school in general, so that's one little casualty, which is I'm kind of upset about, but I guess it is what it is.
It's unbelievable. I was lucky enough back in before we started Psymposia in 2014, Hampshire College in Amherst, Mass, really obviously progressive school. They offered we did a Plants of the Gods class, and it was only during the Jan term, but the interest in it was huge. There was a ton of classes being offered in the Jan term and in the break, and we did the Plants of the Gods class. It was for a week, and you know, we kind of covered the spectrum of plants, and it was the most popular class, and it was filled up within, I think, a week. We had a ton of people sign up for it. Obviously, only probably half that came to the class, but it was still awesome. There's demand for it. Mm-hmm. There's a real demand for it. And the other path I would have taken if I didn't put all my time into Psymposia, I was thinking about doing the academic route. I had applied for an ethnobotany master's at the University of Hawaii. That didn't work out, but I think that anyone going into the field of plant science, there is a need for younger people to make those inroads in academia, in psychoactive plants, in cannabis courses. there's a real need for that in mycology courses.
Yeah.
That's fascinating.
It's hugely important, and it's people are very interested in them, but the classes aren't offered. I mean, I think if most universities had a course on psychedelics or on psychoactive plants, they'd be hugely popular.
Yeah.
There's a lot of that taboo that still exists in academia, though.
So why engage academia? It's kind of a devil's advocate question. I have my own opinions, but why get involved?
So I agree. I mean, I agree with you. I decided to not do it. There was a lot of amazing professors at UMass Amherst, but there was also a lot of bullshit in the bureaucracy that I saw, and each department would have their squabbles with one another, and and then they have their disagreements with deans and everything. So I chose to not do academia, but I think it's hugely important that it's there. I think that it's sad that this isn't something that's offered to people.
Yeah, the devil's advocate position, I guess, on what I was asking was, what would happen if Roland Grifiths and the Mithoffers didn't end up becoming MDs? We would be pretty far behind. Same thing with Nichols, David Nichols. We kind of need him too in this whole project. So it's thankful for them for being able to put up with the bullshit, but it's so much bullshit.
It's so much bullshit. I try to not even pay attention. That's why it's fun doing this project, because there's no bullshit.
Yeah, very minimal bullshit in podcast land too.
Yeah, there's no watch what you say or do, because you're gonna get your NIDA funding pulled on you,
right,
or something like that. But yeah, we have become good friends with a lot of the people in the Hopkins team, and with Bill Richards. We hung out with Bill the other day, and he's an amazing guy.
Nice.
And I have tremendous respect for all those people, because what they're doing, I think, requires a tremendous amount of patience. And I mean, Bill's been doing this, I think almost twice as long as I've been alive. So, and they're going to succeed. They're absolutely going to succeed in what they're doing. It's just patience and continuing the good work,
Absolutely.
The evidence around it speaks for itself.
Yeah. Yep. I just read Acid Trip by John Schroeder.
Tom Schroeder,
thank you. We just interviewed him too, and it pretty much detailed Rick's whole path through college, flaky path through college into where he is today. It's pretty fascinating. There's a lot of other parallel stories, but it's just amazing that he ended up having to go back to Harvard of all places.
Well, it certainly makes some people. I don't know. It's kind of nice having that little Harvard PhD next to you,
right?
Especially dealing with this, because it's needed. It's I find so fascinating in looking at the groups that are doing different work in the scene, and everybody's doing what needs to be done, and everybody's doing it in a different way. And I think that's really awesome. Everybody has their own take on it, and I think together the conversations, the tone of conversations are changing pretty fast.
Mm-hmm.
I think that even in the few years that we've known one another, I think that things have changed a lot.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I even just think about what you guys are doing before Psymposia. I mean, there were some conferences that were just pretty strictly academic. And then you guys kind of had this storytelling event. And then we were getting different aspects of what people have gone through in the psychedelic realm. And, just hearing these different stories. And it's really cool. And some of those stories that are maybe told by the professionals probably wouldn't have been told at a more academic conference. So it's kind of cool to see, these mix of worlds come together. And it is like a double-edged sword conversation we've been having with a lot of people, with kind of, just doing the work, but then everybody's kind of on the other side too, where it's like, yeah, we know this is just what it is. And, yeah.
Well, we have tried to, I think, so we did 2 conferences, and anybody listening to this who has to do a conference, I totally encourage you to do it. It's a lot of work, and there's a lot of things that you never think about that are going to come up. Who's picking this person up? What Airbnb are they staying at? All this stuff. And we were so unorganized in doing it. Lucky enough, Lex is amazing at just moving things along and keeping the flow going and keeping it casual and cool. And so I think due to our incompetence, I guess, we kind of created the unacademic conference. and that was something we were going for. We wanted to keep it casual. We wanted to keep people laughing. We wanted to limit how many PowerPoints there were. And since last year, the Psychedelic Stories events have become the coolest thing that we're doing live, because it's just people's stories, and
right.
Those are very powerful. And it's really a community thing, and it's underground, above ground, people in the arts, people in classrooms, and it's fun. And I think it lets people see the other side of some people, and just keeping things casual is a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the events are always great. Maybe could you kind of go into the progression, like how you guys started and now these different events that you're putting on, and how has the company progressed over the past few years?
So yeah, we did that first conference 2014. We did another event. We have another event series called People on Drugs, and we did that in Boston in the fall, and that series is still evolving. We did that again in December of last year at the University of Pennsylvania with SSDP, and we've changed that into more of Lex is just jamming in front of a crowd, and doing like what we're doing right now, but in front of a bunch of people. Mm-hmm. And it's really just to take that presentationness out of it and just be casual about it and just talk about it, because that's actually what's needed most, I think, in all of drug policy, is just people having conversations with other people on these things. I can talk to my grandmother about this stuff now, and it's awesome. So in last year, in 2015, in April, we did the Envisioning a Post-Prohibition World Conference at UMass again, and that was amazing. We had Arowitz come in for that, and we had Dorian Sagan talked. We had 20-some speakers over 3 days. It was a blast. And oh my God, last fall we were all over the place. We did the Catharsis in Catharsis on the Mall, and at the Drug Policy Alliance conference. We're doing that again this year. That was great. So we initially started doing a lot of events, and over the last probably 4 months now or so, we are adding in the magazine. So the magazine is kind of going deeper than we would at events. Mm. And they work really nice hand in hand, because we have a place for people to come together. Where we've expanded where we're doing stuff a lot now. Tipper, the musician Tipper, reached out to us, and we just did an event in I believe it was April. Lex went down to Florida. Cool. We're doing our talks down there. They invited us again for the next Tipper and Friends event. We were doing an event out in San Francisco, Montreal. moving around. We're doing some of the SSTP regional conferences this fall, and the magazine is our tool online for doing the work online, connecting with different groups online. I'm talking to Dance Safe online. I think they're gonna have a column within the magazine, and the magazine allows us to really reach out to people very far away. And we have an article coming out about what is marijuana and psychedelics like in Hong Kong. We have one coming out in Sweden. We have one coming out with a bunch of activists down in Mexico. So it's really allowing us to reach out much further, and something that we really like to do, since we're thinking about this stuff all the time, and we find when we're talking to other people and amongst ourselves, we're starting to think of new questions that are coming up. Kind of as we're transitioning, we like to think, I'm going to preface that by, I think we'd all like to think that the drug war thing is unraveling itself over the next handful of years. Who knows? But then you get things like Kratom that become scheduled, and you're like, what the fuck? What's going on with this?
Yeah.
It's a complete step in the wrong direction. So who knows? And all you can do is keep doing it. So, we're trying to look at these new questions. What is regulation going to look like? What is legalization looking like in these states? How does that differ between each state? We're trying to tackle a lot of social concerns, and arguments that over the last couple of years, you're starting to see so many more mainstream publications come out with articles on psychedelics now.
Yeah.
It's a daily basis now at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And, they all start out with the same thing. Ayahuasca, this Amazonian brew, it contains this thing called DMT. That's not our approach to things. We are kind of, we're trying to do a little bit beyond that. We're assuming that the people who are reading this or into this, they know those things. They know that MDMA is also known as ecstasy.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what we're kind of doing. We're trying to progress certain conversations that we're interested in and we think are important for people to talk about.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think that's kind of what Joe and I are trying to do with this project, is kind of pushing past some of those just major headlines that a lot of it's repetitive. If you're interested in this stuff or you're a student researching this all the time, you kind of come back to the same old stuff.
Yeah, it gets boring after a while.
Yeah, and I always appreciated going to conferences and having these side conversations with people. They're always so rich, full of great ideas, and kind of just all trying to push the field in a new direction, or just kind of brainstorming together. And
absolutely, that's actually something that we talk about all the time. Is we say we want to cover conversations that we would actually find ourselves having when the speaker comes off the stage,
right?
In the hallway or in the back of in the room. Those conversations, that's what we want to talk about.
Yeah, because they're so full of rich ideas and maybe stuff that just never been heard of. Somebody might have mentioned some research that I never heard of from a while ago. We were just talking, I forget who we were talking with, because I think it came up a couple times, but they were saying with the MDMA that, they were trying to see what the effects on the brain are, and how, you couldn't just study the effects because maybe people that do MDMA have done other drugs, so it's really hard. But there's a group of Mormons that's all they do is MDMA, and I didn't know about that, which I thought was kind of cool. That wow, there's a group of people that in their beliefs, they're not allowed to touch any substance, but it never said anything about MDMA. So here's a whole group of people that you could possibly research.
Yeah. That was talked about in the acid trip book.
Oh, so that was with Tom.
Yeah.
And it was so fascinating. I had no idea.
Well, they also drink didn't they use ephedra?
Oh, maybe.
They use it like ephedra tea. I think that's what it is, ephedra.
That sounds like a good idea. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's what they use, and I think that's actually that's a scheduled substance. I'm not sure. I haven't thought about that in a while. That is a scheduled. That's a scheduled substance, though. They call it Mormon tea. It's probably some derogatory term, but
right.
That's
they did actually, as part of the safety study, get access to this Mormon population, and that was a big portion of MAPS being able to push forward.
Mm-hmm. And, that's a good piece of information for maybe somebody that wants to start doing research, that they're not getting that in like major headlines or some other publications that are out there. And so, yeah, I think, there's a lot of rich context in some of these conversations.
Yeah, they're the most fascinating. I mean, because it's people who are thinking about this stuff all the time.
Right.
I think I don't know, they're just thinking about it all the time, and they get a lot of new ideas that are created. Yeah. And how do we apply those new things? How do we I think the movement needs to be self-critical. Mm-hmm. I think that's one of the most important things, is that people working in these different fields need to be self-critical of what is going on. So we're not just towing a line of, psychedelics are great for everybody, or whatever. It's there's a lot of important questions that need to be asked.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it was funny when you said something about just like the major headlines. I remember seeing like all these like ayahuasca articles pop up on like yoga channels and stuff like that.
Sounds about right.
It's funny how some of those major headlines get published.
Yeah, there's a lot of that going on. It's ayahuasca is becoming, hugely popular. I'm really fascinated seeing how that plays out over the next decade. It's crazy how popular it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what's your take on it, coming from like a plant background, studying plants and whatnot?
I haven't drank ayahuasca before. I think the whole thing's fascinating. I'm somewhat turned off by the whole ayahuasca tourism thing.
Yeah.
I think it's a it's a can of worms. And just the whole thing is messy to me, and how that's changing a lot of I don't know, a lot of stuff down there, I guess. I don't think I'm too qualified to comment on a lot of it. I can kind of have my own opinions on it, but I mean, if I were to do it, I would go down there, because I can't think of a more beautiful place. I was lucky enough to go down to the Amazon in 2013, and it's in my top few experiences I've ever had. It's at least outside of Iquitos is a crazy place. It is insane. And but once you get out of Iquitos, you're in a magic world. You're really in a magic world, and I had never been there before. It's unbelievable. I mean, it's like going back. My thoughts were, it's like going back 60 million years in time, and also going back like 100 years in time, because Iquitos is really founded on Western rubber barons. In the late 1800s, early 1900s, just plopping down in the middle of the Amazon, and there's a lot of history on that there. But I think since the 70s, Iquitos has just exploded in population.
Oh, I bet.
And I could be wrong on this, but I think the population went from in the 30,000 or so in the 70s. I think McKenna writes about this, but maybe 30,000 in the 70s to like 400,000 now. And it's a wacky city.
Yeah.
It's not really a city. it's kind of like, you know, Mad Max world in a sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, if I was gonna drink, I'd be very interested in going down there, going to a very legitimate place with an awesome shaman. I think the way that people talk about shamanism now is, I encourage anybody who's interested in shamanism, I encourage them to read Stephen Bayer's book, Singing to the Plants. It is one of the best books I've ever read, and it will change how you may think of shamanism. And it's a fascinating read, and it gets into every aspect of it. It's a beautiful book. And I was reading that while I was down there, and it really helped me contextualize everything. And it's a great book.
Cool. I'll have to check it out. Maybe we'll link it up with the show notes, and people can maybe order it if they're interested.
Sounds like we both wrote it down.
Yeah, I did.
He has this ability to be, I don't want to say completely objective, but incredibly objective. And he just kind of paints this. He has a lens to look through. Here's what they believe. Here's what's going on. Here's my experiences. The subtitle is A Guide to Mestizo Shamanism in the Upper Amazon. And, you know, when people think about shamanism, they think it's this monolithic thing, and that a shaman means one thing. And that's completely incorrect. Like, shamanism is completely... There are qualities of shamanism that tend to be, repeated amongst different peoples, but it's also very different and individual as well.
Yeah. So, I'm on the website right now, and I kind of wanted to come back to the magazine.
Sure.
Are you accepting articles? How are you finding people? And I'm on this, and I kind of want to just read this one headline. I think it's funny. A narc gives a priest LSD, and then a little under tag says, he says, Ralph, have you ever done LSD? Of course, my dad's speaking to a policeman, and it's the 70s, and my dad hasn't done LSD. That sounds like a really great story to read. So yeah, how are you finding these stories? Are people just submitting?
So that story that's I think one of the best stories we've had. That story is from our friend Danji, who's in Montreal, and I'm not going to explain that story, but it's awesome. And so for the stories, we're taking some of the stories that we've done live, and we're transcribing them and then including the video with them. But we're also taking submissions from people who have an interesting perspective on something. And we actually just got a new Psychedelic Stories editor who works with people in developing their stories, and we're going to be coming out with a series of stories from people who have been in the Hopkins studies. Mike's been working on that. I read one of them, and it's a beautiful story. And so I mean, people, if you have a cool story, you can send us an email at hi@psymposia.com, and we're happy to take a look at it. And we also do the live events too. And we for the live events, getting stories, we schedule a handful of speakers. I'd say that we schedule maybe 2/3 of the speakers, and then we leave a third open for people to pitch their story to Lex. And we like to keep that open because that introduces, this element of, it can go in any direction, and that's really good. And we've gotten some amazing stories that way as well.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Awesome. And what was that email address again?
Hi. At Psymposia.com.
Awesome. We'll link that up.
Yeah. Happy to take a look at anybody's submissions.
Cool. Where do you see the future of this magazine going?
I I think it's going to be awesome. I think we're putting a lot of work into it. We've had just like with our first event that we did, we didn't know what we were doing, and all of a sudden we have hundreds of people coming out to it. The magazine just kind of set the intention that we want to make something really awesome that discusses these things, talks about these things, networking with other people in groups, and we've gotten lots of submissions. We have gotten a lot of people who want to edit and who want to write for it. And yeah, we're keeping doing that. We want to come out with high quality articles, stuff that maybe have a little bit different angle on things, and we're going to be launching a Patreon crowdfunding campaign very soon, maybe this weekend. We've been working on that for a little while to get some funding. We're also looking for other people who are interested in funding the magazine and kind of taking it to the next level. We see a lot of potential with it. We're getting great. We're getting a lot of support, a lot of page views right now. So yeah, we're plugging away at it.
Awesome.
Other than cool. Tipper, are you guys getting any attention from the music world or art world?
So, not hugely, but we haven't put a lot of. It's something that we want to expand into, but we haven't put a tremendous amount of time into that. Tipper, his manager, who's also named Dave, who's an amazing dude. I've had some great conversations with him. He reached out to us, and he liked what we're doing, what we're doing, and what Lex is doing. And he asked us if we wanted to be involved in kind of just doing what we're doing at their event, and doing some stories, doing the quote unquote real drug education thing. And I want to keep doing that. We've met a couple other musicians, pretty well-known musicians, but it's an area that we want to expand on more. Having them do the psychedelic stories, having them do interviews with us. I'd love to do some type of concert or some type of live music thing where we do some benefit thing. I think that would be fantastic to do with some bands that really believe in it. There's so many opportunities.
Yeah.
And, for me, music's one of my big passions. I'm a pretty active music listener. So, you can tell the bands who are down with the cause.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty easy to spot.
Yeah.
Well, that's cool. So I just had a thought earlier about Lex possibly being the next Terrence McKenna.
I don't think we want to tell that to Lex.
All right, Lex, if you're listening, don't do it. But no, really, his style of communication is just so in depth that I think there's something to it.
Yeah, Lex is great at connecting dots. He's fantastic at connecting dots. He knows a lot. He's a great host. He's fantastic.
Is he usually the host for your events?
Yeah, mostly. We're doing an event in San Francisco, and Mike's going to be hosting that.
Mm-hmm.
But when we get stuff mostly on the East Coast, Lex takes care of that.
That's cool. And so I don't think while recording, we got to talk about the after party at all for Horizons.
Sure.
I think we should probably jump into that a little bit. So
sure.
Horizons is an event coming up in about a month from the date we're recording. So maybe we just talk about it briefly.
Yeah, Horizons is, if anybody has not been to Horizons, I absolutely encourage you to go. I think it's the best conference in the world on this. This is their 10th anniversary this year. And they have their best of speakers, a lot of their best of speakers. It's 2 days. It's October. It's technically 2 days, but it's October 7th through the 9th. The conference itself is on the 8th and the 9th at the Cooper Union. And on the 7th, they do the opening reception. I'm not entirely sure if they're doing it at the Rubin Museum this year again. But it's a great weekend. I've met amazing people there, and a lot of people say the same thing. And you can find that their website is horizonsnyc.org. And we are collaborating with MAPS. We do the unofficial after party that weekend, and we're doing it at Lot 45 in Bushwick in Brooklyn. We're doing it with Duncan Trussell. He was wonderful enough to fly in for that. And we have a handful of other speakers. By the time this podcast is out, we'll have the full lineup. We're planning on that very soon to release that. And we're going to be doing a couple hours of storytelling, 15, 20-minute stories. We're going to also have some comedy as well. We're going to have some music, dancing, hanging out, meeting people, having a good time. And, that money is going to go to help support what we're doing, what the work that MAPS is doing. And, just bringing people together. And that's what we're really trying to do at these events. Bringing good people together.
For those who don't know, Duncan Trussell is a reasonably popular, maybe almost famous comedian. He's got a wonderful podcast, Duncan Trussell Family Hour. Maybe not for the faint of heart, but if you have a little bit of comedy in you, it's definitely worth checking out. And seeing him live is something else. I actually met Brian at a Duncan Trussell show in Baltimore a while ago. It was pretty cool.
Duncan's an awesome guy. He's really supportive of this. He's a really smart dude. He's on Joe Rogan's podcast all the time. That's how I initially heard about him, probably like everybody. And he's been very supportive, super cool, down to earth dude. So I'm really looking forward to this. It's going to be probably our coolest event we've done.
Sounds it. I'm excited for it.
Yeah, tickets are going to be up on Psymposia.com. And if you are going to Horizons, you'll also be able to get a ticket there. We're reserving some for people going there too. So probably wouldn't wait for that though. We pretty much sold the entire thing out last year in an afternoon.
Cool. And is there a limit for tickets? Do you have a space limit on the venue?
The capacity is pretty good this year. We're going to have we're hoping to have 500 people there. Duncan's going to be promoting it as well. So that's going to really, really help everything. And, it's going to be cool because it's going to be a mix of people going to Horizons and people don't know about Horizons. And hopefully it connects some dots with different people there as well. Because I think that a lot of people who would listen to Duncan don't know about that there's actually people who are actively working in this field. There's so many amazing groups in this field that if you're probably not really into it, you might not know about,
Right.
There's awesome groups. Dance Safe's doing awesome things. SSDP chapters, Beckley. There's great groups out there.
Yeah, I've recently been doing some volunteer work with MAPS and the integration list. And I'm just finding out about all these really cool integration services and groups, there's so many groups out there that even people that might be kind of in the field don't even know about.
I'm learning about different ones all the time. And then there's the whole psychedelic society phenomenon that is, those groups are popping up everywhere.
Right.
And, there's a lot of people. There's a lot of people who want to be involved. And there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And I think that's one of the most important things going forward is, people focusing on creating these integration groups, emphasizing the need for long-term integration. That's hugely important. I don't think that can be really missed. I mean, obviously, some people are going to be cool taking psychedelics and integrating that into their own life, but I think that having these groups, these circles around is really important.
Yeah, definitely.
People can share their stories and weave that into their everyday experiences, and it's very important. I mean, you could do it. You can have a psychedelic experience once, and you're working on it the rest of your life, probably.
Mm-hmm.
You're always talking about it. Every time you talk about it to someone else, you're still integrating that in a sense,
Right. You develop like a new narrative, or something else pops up in your mind. You're like, oh wait, I never thought about that before.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Every time like I tell a story, I always think about different scenarios that come up, or a different way to talk about it that I haven't previously talked about it before.
Yeah, when we were hanging out with Bill Richards, I think he says this kind of frequently, that you can integrate that experience the rest of your life.
Yeah.
And a lot of people do psychedelics somewhat frequently, and then there are some people who might do them once a year, or may do them once every handful of years, or once in their lifetime, and everybody's different in that. And but I think integration is hugely important.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're going to start seeing that service offered more. It's not enough to just, and especially with people who may not know anything about it.
Right.
And I think I know the New York Times had just come out with that story about, I think, some shady practices happening with an experimental, I think, I could be completely wrong, but I think it was an experimental cannabinoid that they were doing at NYU, and the study got shut down. And I think one of the criticisms of it, and this is from this journalist perspective, so I mean, I could just be talking bullshit here, but I think one of the criticisms of it was this woman, they were just giving it to her, and there was no aftercare involved. And that can't be done. That's a very important thing, I think, going forward, is really providing the support for those people. Because that's part of the work.
Right. Yeah, when I was helping out with this history of psychedelics class at my undergraduate school, we had somebody that was from Brazil, and so I believe they were part of like the ayahuasca communities down there, and they said, the real work doesn't start until after the ceremony. And I think we get caught up in thinking that what happens during the ceremony, that was it. But yeah, some of the real work and some of the real meaning doesn't happen until after all that has passed.
Absolutely. I mean, I think a lot of the work that we're doing on our project is still weaving that in. We had these experiences, and we're interested in these things, and we're passionate about these things, and we want to create organizations and projects that are helping other people out, spreading the message, and building the programs and the services that are required. So that to me, that's still part of the integration process, and so yeah, I mean, there's so many things, like getting back to the way earlier point of what can people do. They can do everything.
Right.
You can do everything. I mean, you can weave your psychedelic experiences in pretty much any area that's shit that needs fixing. Right. And that's the whole world needs fixing in to some degree. And that insight can be applied to so many things.
Yeah. Yeah, it could be big, it could be small. Sometimes, like after the breathwork sessions that I've had, I had something simple. It was like maybe reliving some sort of thing with my family. And then the message I get is like, well, why don't you just call your mom? It's like, oh yeah, I should do that. Or hey, why don't you pick up the phone and just, do an action?
Yeah.
The big message that I got during my first breathwork ceremony was, hey, like you need to like kind of teach some of this stuff. You need to talk about your near-death experience and talk about these non-ordinary states and da 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 da. And I was like, well, I don't really know what to do for that. And then by the time my capstone project rolled around, I ended up creating a class on like Groff's theories and breathwork and all this stuff. And my breathwork teachers looked at me and they're like, "Do you like you just did what you were talking about like 4 years ago during your first breathwork session?" I was like, "Oh yeah," like not even being really conscious of it.
Yeah, just do what just do what you love to do, and everything works itself out. I guess that sounds cliche. It sounds so cliche, and I hate cliches, but it's kind of the truth,
Yeah.
You find yourself in strange places, in really awesome, interesting places, if you really just do what you love to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's just, it takes patience. It takes some patience.
Yeah. Patience is key.
You got to remember to smoke your weed every once in a while. That's what I try to say.
Do you ever run into folks that maybe try to do ayahuasca once a month or once a week? I know they're not going to the jungle to do that kind of thing, but
I personally haven't.
Okay.
I do know, I'm not directly connected, but I do know that there are circles that exist in different cities, I think on a fairly regular basis, but I'm not aware of anyone personally, no.
Okay. Yeah, I just think they're out there, and I think I hope they're doing small doses weekly, not big ones.
Anyone that's going to be involved in that, I think doing your homework on it is important. I know something that, is pretty wild is that I know there are some email lists that go out that they openly say what they're doing, which I think is kind of crazy. They're openly advertising what they're doing. Now, there's no hidden words.
Right. Yeah, I've had some like weird invites to Facebook groups and this and that, and it just makes me scratch my head. I'm like, is this real? Like, are people just openly advertising some of this stuff?
Yeah, they are. I think that anyone that's going to do that. I tend to be a skeptic.
Yeah, me too.
I'm not gonna just join any group that's doing that. I want to know what they know what they're doing. Like I said, I haven't drank ayahuasca, but I want to know what they're doing. I want to know if they're, quote unquote qualified, or if there's some shithead that's just, doing it. And I think that there's a lot of shitheads that are just doing it. It's not just here that they're doing that, in Amazon, in the Ketos, it's also, there's plenty of people who are just, like have spider webs set up to just catch naive people going in and doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a lot of the dark side in this. And that's why I think one of the important things for groups to be doing is highlighting a lot of the bullshit that's going on and a lot of the dark side of things, because it does exist and it is real, and it's out there.
Yeah.
And in Bayer's book, he talks a lot about practices of certain shamans, and they're not what we consider shamanism.
Mm-hmm.
But that's actually, that's part of it.
Yeah.
The sorcerer is very much part of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's the cool thing for like, symposia and some of these academic conferences. I think that's a really cool thing about like education, for instance. Going to these conferences and listen to like Irowid present, right? And just hearing about like how much of the drugs out there aren't the real drugs, and just hearing like some of these stories. Like I know you guys had I'm spacing on her name, Lily, maybe at the first Symposia conference.
Yeah, really.
And she talked about her experience down in Peru and the Amazon. And so I think it's really important that some of this information gets out there, and these outlets are available.
Well, if we're gonna be talking about drugs, we want to be honest about it. And to be honest about it, there's a lot of bullshit. There's benefits and risks of all drugs. It's dependent on the dosage. It's dependent on a lot of other things. And, even with MDMA, this is the thing that a lot of people don't want to hear about MDMA. MDMA has risks. There are risks associated with it, whether you like it or not. Marijuana has risks associated with it. There is such a thing as smoking too much. There is such a thing as smoking too often. There are concerns with dabbing and the way that people go about it and what their ingestion methods are. There are concerns about it, and if any of us want to be taken seriously, we're not talking about the risks. We're not doing a service to anybody. We're really not.
Yeah.
We want to be smart about it. If we want to have the world we want to see, we need to talk about it. It's not like we want to focus on the risks, but I don't think that as war on drugs and all this bullshit unwinds. I mean, war on drugs is just focusing. Prohibition is just focusing strictly on the negatives. We can't just have a polar view of that and focus strictly on the positives. Then we create something that we don't want to see. We need to shed light on the harms that can be created by drugs.
Yeah.
So that's really important to talk about those things. It's not the most fun to talk about those things, but they're there, they exist, and they need light on them.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, especially if people are going out and doing these things. I mean, it's just good to educate yourself and have these conversations.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and something else you were saying, I guess, going back to like these people openly advertising different things. We had Jonathan Thompson on one of our episodes, and we got into a discussion about the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. So anybody that might be getting these emails or joining Facebook groups, there's definitely check it out. There's not too many legitimate places within the United States that are doing this legally.
Yeah, that there are opinions on both sides of I don't want to break it down to two sides, but on both sides of the aisle on the RFRA, and I mean, I think it's I don't think you need religion to do any of these things. I think that's I guess if you want to play that game, can be beneficial, can help you get set up and I guess mitigate harms of the law. But I ultimately I think it's ridiculous that I have to have an organized religion to eat a plant. That's craziness to me. It's not craziness, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I don't need to prescribe to any sort of religion to eat a plant or a mushroom. I think that I should be able to do that if I choose. I can go eat the cyanide cherry trees that grow all over the place. I mean, where's the law on that? I mean, there's so many psychoactive plants. And most of them are not scheduled or don't have anything to do with that. So I don't know. I lean on the side of I'm not a huge fan of the cognitive liberty argument, but I do lean on that side with this. I don't need a religion to justify this. And that's why I love the whole ethnobotany plant perspective, because in that world, there's no taboos surrounding this. They're plants. They make these compounds. These compounds serve a variety of uses within the plant and within, the ecology and the animals and insects that are in their environment. And there's no taboo. It's like completely takes the taboo away from them.
Mm.
And great. They're called secondary metabolites. Great. That doesn't that doesn't bring up any association of drugs.
Right.
So that's why I love. It's very, and that's a great angle if you ever want to talk to certain people. If you pull the ethnobotany or the plant science card, it's very easy to talk to people about that.
Mm.
And that it's a great strategy, because I'm always actively thinking of different strategies to talk to different people about it.
Right.
The other card, for anyone listening, the other card that's always good to pull is John Hopkins. That just takes defenses down. That
they're doing rigorous research. You mean?
Yeah. Hopkins, NYU, Imperial College. You pull that card, and people suddenly they're oh, I didn't know that.
Right.
And that's a good one. I encourage people to use that one.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good parent one too. It's just a very strategic parent card to play.
I was thinking about that Hopkins thing the other day, and coming out of like why are we not funding a lot of this research internationally? Like, there's got to be places where we could legally have a doctor and a bunch of patients go for 6 months to do a bunch of research. Double blind even, but
Sure,
why does it need to be John Hopkins? But then I realized we needed to be able to pull that card.
Yeah, I think a lot of the countries it's still highly illegal, and I know that like ayahuasca is protected in Peru. I think it's to a certain degree protected in Brazil. I think that's awesome if it's setting up those studies in other countries or programs in other countries. Like, I think the laws need to be radically changed here, but at the same time, if it's open in other countries, they, pursue that too. It's not just one. There's no just one strategy. I think all these things work together.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was actually, I forget if it was a Grifiths or Mithoffers, but they were going to go do some research in like the Virgin Islands or something like that, and then they found out they could do it domestically. So it wasn't like that wasn't really thought of before. And I think maybe John Lilly was doing that kind of stuff on his own out in the Caribbean for a while too. End of, I guess I can't really say end of Prohibition, but mid-Prohibition.
In the Virgin Islands?
John Lilly had a place. Yeah, he was doing like float tanks and ketamine and LSD and all that kind of stuff. Like real life mad scientist kind of stuff. I'm sure it was all bootleg, below the radar stuff, but John Lilly was doing a lot of that.
Yeah, man, imagine this, all these people who have created these organizations now, a lot of these older people in the scene, they, imagine that happening to us now. We're in, 20s, 30s, and the government just throws this monkey wrench into everything for the next, 30, 40 years,
I think we would quickly do geo arbitrage. We would totally just like figure out legal loopholes, like places to do it. Internet makes it a lot easier. Yes,
that is true. And I think that's one of the fundamental differences now, social media and the internet. I think that's a big, I guess a big safety thing. But, at the same time, Lex recently told me, it's great to be optimistic on all this, but it really does only take an administration change for things to be changed dramatically. So we get, I mean, at least with marijuana, for the most part, we have a president and a Department of Justice just completely looking the other way and, in encouraging these things. And I don't know where that is necessarily going to go. So I guess we'll see soon.
It's kind of scary, man, because even if we don't end up with the Donald, who's to say Hillary would be as kind as Obama on the marijuana issue, even.
Yeah, I think that the best bone that's going to be thrown potentially is rescheduling, to Schedule 2. But I mean, I was thinking about this the other day. That's even ridiculous. I mean, great. It's Schedule 2 now. I mean,
it's a little less jail time.
Yeah, that's like saying, okay, I don't get life in prison now, I only get 10 years or something. Great. I think it's cool. I think it's a step in the right direction, but it's still a step it's still in the prohibitionist paradigm.
Right.
I think. And I'm very weary on a lot of those things. It's still in the prohibitionist language. I like the Portugal drug policy. I think it's super progressive. All drugs are decriminalized, but it still plays on some prohibitionist language. And, I support it, and I think it's obviously moving forward and steps in the right direction. But I still think there's work to be done, and I still think there's progress to be made. I don't think it ever stops, but I think the pressure still needs to be applied, and just because having a medical marijuana program isn't enough. Having legalization may not be enough because legalization differs from each state, and a legalization that doesn't have the right for people to grow on their own is not legalization. That's bullshit. So yeah, and then we're going to be dealing with this whole thing of regulation. What does regulation mean? We've been saying we want regulation, but what does that actually mean? And who is actually going to do it? And there's a lot of potential problems right there in the regulation. I saw some headline. I've seen a couple of people throw around regulation. Is it going to be Prohibition 2.0?
Yeah, you got a good point there.
So, and who handles that? Are we going to give that power to a bunch of idiots who don't know what they're doing either?
Odds are good. Yeah. Could you speak to the Portugal prohibitionist paradigm? Are they saying you can't carry a certain amount or you can't manufacture?
Well, it's still under certain it's under certain limits. As each drug has its own. I'm not a scholar on this by any means. Sure. But it still uses some of the same language. I think there's also, we're still, I think harm reduction is hugely important, but there's also using drugs for pleasure. There's also using drugs for the positive elements of it. And I think that if we're just focusing on the bad, harm reduction is going to be like the next step in the positive direction. But I think that you can go a step further with that too. You can use these things because you actually like it and it brings you pleasure, and that's like the dirty thing, like doing drugs for pleasure, or using substances for pleasure. In Portugal, I believe that they have like these counseling, like these courts where you don't go into it's not the criminal justice system, but it's these. Like I said, I'm not a scholar on this by any means, but you go through the system, you still go through the system if you're referred. I forget what they're called.
If somebody calls the cops on you, says you're addicted or whatever, like he needs some counseling.
Or if you're caught with a certain amount, I encourage people not to listen to me and look these things, honestly.
So I think a lot of the origins, this like concept of the Protestant work ethic, and like the whole U.S. being founded by like pilgrims who carried that Protestant work ethic over, and not to mention like the German immigrants too. Like, it's just this thing of hard work is the thing that's good, and pleasure is the thing that's bad. Mm-hmm. That's why people would probably regulate sex if they could. And
they absolutely would. I mean, it's been tried, I think, by plenty of societies have attempted to do that. The Romans attempted to do that with Augustus.
In a sense, they kind of already have regulated it. It's just not in the legal system.
Yeah, prohibiting drugs is just as it's going to be just as much of a failure as trying to prohibit sex or language. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's hard to believe that it's even happened.
Right. Yeah, it is kind of crazy to think about.
Like, I mean, drug law. What have drug laws done? I mean, there's more drugs being used. They haven't done anything.
Yeah.
They haven't done anything. They've created, like, people are going to do what people are going to do. We should set up the systems that it's going to minimize harms there, not great. So if I use whatever the drug is, maybe it'll have some bad effect on me. But what's the worst? What's worse than that? Going to jail for 15 or 20 years or life? I mean, that is unbelievable. That's remarkable that someone can go to jail for multiple years for personal use of a drug. I mean, even selling it, I think there's a better alternative to that.
Right. Yeah.
Like, that's Middle Ages shit.
Pretty much, yeah. It's crazy that people can't kind of see it. I guess it's part of our indoctrination.
Yeah, a lot of people have gone through multiple decades of drug propaganda, and it's hard for people to see that. These arguments are still difficult for a lot of people to believe. It's easy for us because it's, we're in it, we see it, and it's incredibly obvious. It's not so obvious for other people. I say to my grandma, like, when my grandma was born, Prohibition was going on for 2 more years. So, I say to her, when you were born, alcohol was basically illegal. And when I was born, marijuana was legal. And it's the same concept. And it's, the state coercing people by force, by prison, into not doing something. And the same bullshit happened, And it's got so far, it's become so far that we don't even know what to do with it now.
Right.
There's this huge vacuum that's opening up now. Marijuana law in the United States is fucked.
Yeah.
It's still a Schedule 1 substance, but yet all these states, it's like they have medical programs and it's legal. What is going on?
Yeah. I just wonder, like, how much of it is also a person's denial in the fact that a lot of people use different substances. Like, for example, I just stumbled across an article today. Something not too far away from me, they want to put up a drug rehab center, and the community is fighting against it, opposing it, because some people are saying, well, that's not what the area is zoned for, we don't want it. But it makes me just think that some of these people just don't want it there because they think that people that use substances are criminals, but also we don't have a problem in our community. Like, what are we gonna just bring people in from outside the community? It's like, no, you do realize there's a huge population that that are doing heroin around here. And it's just like, it's interesting that the community wouldn't be like, yeah, we should probably have something like that because it's a problem. Like, people are overdosing all the time and we should probably do something about it. Instead, they're like, nah, I don't know. We just don't want it. It's like zoning things, we just don't want it here. I don't know.
Yeah, not in my backyard.
Yeah. It's like, well, it's already in your backyard. So let's have a conversation about it.
Yeah. It's like the people who are against marijuana, the people who haven't smoked it, and the people who don't care about harm reduction, the people who don't know anyone that's affected, and that's a whole other issue about like the different treatment centers. Because I've here down in Baltimore, I've heard a huge amount of shit about all the methadone clinics and just about the big business that they are and concentrating everybody in a certain area. I don't know too much about that, and someone else should speak on that. But I think there's a lot of concerns with that as well.
It's interesting because the concept should be that they need to be able to treat everybody from all over the place, but it's like in my town, for instance, they actually concentrated all the pot stores into like 2 buildings total. So there's 4 shops in one building, and then like across the road there's like 1 medical shop, and it is ridiculous. As opposed to like, but that's not really a methadone example. It's kind of different. But a methadone, like, are you going to make all the poor people that want treatment like go to this one part of Baltimore every day, or could you really diversify the locations a little bit, make it more about service than zoning?
Stuff like that. I mean, that should be in the zoning. It should be the primary thing. It should be accessible for different communities. I mean, one of the groups who's gonna benefit the most from this is older people, and where do they go for it?
Yeah, exactly.
How are they getting medicine? It's a incredible medicine for older people. And when are you going to put that in some place where there's going to be like huge amounts of younger people they'll probably be afraid to go to, some wacky head shop somewhere. I was just in New York and I saw a hookah that was an AK-47 hookah. It was all gold. It was the most absurd shit I've ever seen in my life.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I was like, who's gonna buy that? Yeah, I don't know.
Somebody would, but who?
Yeah. I mean, these things should be accessible for people, and they're probably not at all.
Yeah. All right, cool, man. I think we're kind of out of time for today. I'm sure we could talk for a long time.
I'm sure we could.
Yeah, and let's definitely do it again.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. I enjoyed this conversation with you guys.
Absolutely. I think we enjoyed it a ton as well. Where can people check you out online again?
So, Psymposia.com. That's spelled with a P, with a silent P in there. And Facebook and Twitter, both /Psymposia. Check us out. We get a lot of content on our site now. We get a lot of videos up. I'm gonna be, keeping on.
Yeah, you guys have really grown a lot, and you're really able to get a lot of cool stuff to a lot of people who are underserved with this kind of material and community, really. So it's really awesome. Really appreciate everything you guys are doing.
Yeah, appreciate what you guys are doing.
All right.
Thanks for having me.
All right, we'll talk again soon. Thanks.
Okay, peace, guys.